All right, it's loading now. All right, man. Let me go ahead and do the show, and I'll call you right back. All right, then. All right. Mm-hmm. Welcome, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show is there's positive. There's power in numbers and positive change purchasing cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increased market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities, to utilize black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the under and underemployed young African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the also the educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going through a little um, technical difficulty this morning with our show, but we're going to try to soldier on and complete this program. We don't have a scheduled guest this morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are doing the part two segment of our end of year review for 2020-25. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we have been looking back at the year 2025 and the impact that it has on the renewable energy industry and specifically solar and wind as the many legislative executive orders which have been signed by the current administration, which has eliminated the investment tax credits for EV manufacturing, EV federal tax credits for new and used vehicles, heat pumps, and we'll be looking at the attempt to claw back federal funding which was passed by the Biden and Harris administration through the Invest in America agenda to combat climate change. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're jumping right on into our our outline today for the show. Now, we we open up the show, ladies and gentlemen, talking about things that have and will have a drastic impact on the ability for African and African American based firms here in the US to pursue federal contracts, which has been number one, the signing of an executive order, uh, which Trump did on January 21st, his first day in office of last year, which revoked, repealed the 1965 Equal Opportunities Act signed by President Johnson. Now, the executive order, which President Johnson signed, has served as the bedrock for federal contracting law as it relates to the discrimination in federal contracting law. Now, this legislation, as I said, has been the bedrock for preventing discrimination in federal contracting. Now, Congresswoman Shontel Brown from the state of Ohio and Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland have introduced HR 989. That bill number is HR 989, which they have introduced to codify into law the 1965 Equal Opportunities Act, which would, in fact, make it illegal to discriminate in federal contracting law based on race, religion, age, etc. Many of us are familiar with the numerous inclusionary uh, uh, groups as it relates to discrimination in the workplace and the marketplace. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we went on and we looked at that. We also took a look at the uh, moves that were taken by the governing and regulatory entity in for the what we call Mid-Atlantic region, which is the PJM, which is the regulatory body that controls the cost of energy, the price of energy, the cost of transferring that energy from point A to point B, what type of energy can be used in the PG the PJM region, which is composed of 13 states and the District of Columbia. The uh, leadership of the PJM has been one that has been steadfast in not looking at the interest of the 65 million consumers, but looking at the interest of the fossil fuel industry. And Governor Joseph Shapiro of Pennsylvania has been stalwart in his leadership with the other 13 governors and the mayor of District of Columbia in leading the fight to prevent these pass-throughs for infrastructure to cover the cost of powering and building new gas turbine power plants, which are utilizing old decommissioned coal plants, which are being brought back online to power the data centers because of the demand which has been created by artificial intelligence crypto mining, and blockchain technologies, which are needed in today's society. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we looked at that, we covered that, and in the first section of our show. So, we're going to sort of move forward and look at the last 6 months of the year. We also talked about the Biden Harris administration uh, work to codify through the 119th and 18th Congress, which was a campaign which was led by yours truly and other concerned business people in the sector. We also looked at as the other legislative action that has taken place. Now, in an article in March, uh, Trump's war on federal workers, black families pay the price, which we know that over 300,000 African American women have been laid off from the federal jobs. Now, uh, Willie Blackmore published this article talking about Trump's EPA shuts down $3 billion in environmental justice programs. I think that's a must read for many of you. Under President Joe Biden's, the EPA received funding for regional offices was to right environmental wrongs caused by polluters choosing to dump harmful waste around black communities and other communities of color. The environmental section was had a very brief era of environmental justice. Just days after the EPA administrator who was appointed to replace Michael Regan of the Biden administration, Lee Zealand, who Trump brought in, he came back sweeping cuts for the latest of Zealand's war against environmental justice. Now, this information was put out in March, which we also shared with you in the first segment of last year. Then we went on to look at April, open letter of support for HB 0842 and the Justice 40 bill through the Maryland legislature, which was an open letter of support that yours truly I wrote on behalf of the National Association of Blacks and Solar to support a bill that was being introduced by my delegate, Mrs. Dana Tarvez, in the Maryland State Legislature. EPA in May, EPA's new $20 billion Green Bank will benefit disadvantaged communities. Well, we're going to find out that this was announced in May. U.S. Department of Energy faculty applied clean energy science programs first ever cohort. These were all things announcements that were made in May. All these programs have been completely taken off the drawing board because of the cutbacks by the Trump administration. Okay, in June, Governor of the PJM put together an article which was written in the New York Times. Plus, Governor Joe Shapiro had a follow-up meeting in June concerning the 686% rate hike for natural gas and pass-throughs, which accounted for some $4.3 billion in rate hikes that we just got hit with in the PJM region, which composes those 13 states in the District of Columbia. Now, the analysis of the Senate GOP update The mega bill is even worse, the disaster than affordability for jobs and clean energy was a very, very interesting article that was printed in May. You also be able to find U.S. solar manufacturer seeks rhetoric over reality. Now, these articles can all be found under our news and events tab on our website at Positive Change PC. So you would, if you will please go there, you'll be able to follow up on the actual articles that I'm quoting from. Policy uncertainty to $1.4 billion canceled in U.S. manufacturing investments in May. Well, that's the whole purpose of them signing the executive order that took away the investment tax credit E20 E48 for which gave the various foreign corporations, and there were 77 of them, which E2, which is a online tracking uh, 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 clearinghouse for renewable energy, does an excellent job in tracking the investments across all 50 states and looking at the total amount of investment that went into the green and blue and red states based on party affiliation and programs. And you will find that President Biden's strategy was to put the majority of that investment in red states. So out of 133 billion, approximately about 21 billion went into blue states. The other monies went into red states, over $109 billion. So you'll be able to find that information also. So moving on into July, we looked at a report. Inflation Reduction Act delivers massive economic boost, 4-to-1 return on investment, even though we have the data from fiscal year 2023, the interest of the fossil fuel industry and the tech industry with this and these billionaires took priority over the American consumers' interest, as affordability was supposed to be the messaging and campaign in which the, the person who is sitting in the Oval Office ran on. And I'll leave it at that. Now, tracking new clean energy projects, expansion, and productions announced across America. That is an article that I strongly recommend that you look at. Clean energy pipeline grows to 328 billion and 184 in gigawatts prime for deployment. These are all articles that you'll be able to find under our July news and events. Now, in August, one of the main articles is why is my energy bill going up? Why is there attack on solar and wind industry? You'll be able to find that under our news and events tab in August of 2025. And we did quite a bit of coverage around these articles, which provided the data to give people a factual look at what is actually going on in the marketplace rather than people. Everybody has their own opinion there, which they're intended, but everybody don't have the facts. So if you go to our August news and events, you'll be able to see, click on our archives for August of 2025, and you'll be able to find Green Bank's August agenda. Why is my energy bills going up? Why the attack on solar and wind? So we're going to take a few minutes and sort of drill down on this issue. This is an article that was authored by Charles Harper and Milene Kumar, which was actually published back on 425 of 25 in Evergreen Action, but I chose to publish this in August. It's not your imagination. Every bill in the U.S., energy bills in the U.S. have been rising. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, you're not alone. A recent survey found that over 50% of Americans reported feeling overwhelmed by utility costs. But why are bills going up, and what can you do about it? And how can cheap clean energy help? Why is your energy bill going up? Largely both boils down to fossil fuels via, very volatile prices, surging electric demand, and the impacts of climate crisis. And with these higher energy costs are higher electric bills, higher natural gas bills, higher gasoline prices. What causes these higher bills becomes the question. Higher bills include both the cost to produce electricity at the point, power plants, and the cost of the grid infrastructure to get it to your home or business. Both have gone up. Right now, about 60% of U.S. electricity comes from fossil fuels, including fossil gas and coal. Fossil fuels prices have increased over the last few years, partly in response to the war in Ukraine and other geopolitical uncertainty, and they remain quite volatile. When the cost of fossil fuels need to produce electricity goes up, it passes on to you as a higher power bill. And to costs, keep up the cost of the grid construction has also increased. Hidden reasons for this increase in climate change, which is the course primarily caused by burning fossil fuels, which more extreme weather events, weather utility companies are paying more to repair, upgrade power lines. Power lines have some spark wildfires, including California. Utilities are paying more for risk insurance to protect themselves from wildfires liability. Again, many of these costs are passed on to the energy bill. Demand for energy is surging in the U.S. and this is starting to show up on your electricity bills. Power hungry data centers get built around the country to enable the boom in artificial intelligence. Utilities also need to build new power infrastructure to supply data centers without ratepayers protections. Communities get stepped, footing the bill for big tech power needs. What about higher gas bills and prices? What can the states do to lower your bills? How do I lower my bills with cheap, clean energy? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I actually did a show on this, and you'll be able to follow that up. I thought that it was very important that I covered that again today in looking at our year in review. And with that being said, we're going to look on, keep it moving. We're talking about the impact on the big, brutal bill, Maryland's clean energy future. Trump's one big, beautiful bill would hurt clean energy, boost fossil fuels, and investment in environmental justice. How the big ugly bill gets targets the working poor. Louisiana regulators approved infrastructure upgrades to mega data center. Impact of EPA's $7 billion low-income solar for all program on Black-owned companies. Now, we went into talking about the Solar for All program because it was originally a pilot program that was started here in Washington, D.C. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we have been moving the our our platform to talk about these issues, and we have been really drilling down, and we took the time to really drill down on all of these issues because we thought that they are of primary importance to our all of us who are consumers of a need, not a want, because electricity is not a need. It is it is a must. If you own a home, it has to be powered. And as I said, I apologize. It is a need, not a want, because if you own a home, you must have electricity to power that home in order for you to stay there. And we all get that. So as we always say, what's going on in the African American community? Uh, it, it's the, it's the rent now is the gas, water, and electricity bill with the rent. So that that's how we are looking at this and how we are affect our show. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to try to keep this show moving today because as I am technical a to try to get our show started, and we're almost halfway through because we want the 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 what actually took place in November, September, and November. Now, as we turn into September, we looked at data centers already increasing your energy bill. We have the receipts. That's a very interesting article that I think that you want to take the time to uh, see what is what is going on in the marketplace. Uh, let me let me move in that, get back over it, and well, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, as we look into September, as we indicated, we were talking about data centers already increasing your cost of your electricity bill, uh, and it says we have the receipts. That was as I indicated, very interesting article that was in Evergreen Action, which was published website in September. So what we're doing, we're going to September and we're going to take a very short look at this particular article. Uh, a Now, September will lead off with the week heading manufacturing day and more. And you scroll down, you'll see Egyptian billionaire Nasser Serene seeks to invest $5 billion in U.S. infrastructure. Capacity payments rise 1,000% due to data center demand and stagnant power supply. Is AI throwing climate change under the bus, which is another. Uh, we go ahead down, and you will see Prince George's residents speak out against proposed Landover data center. Solar tax credits are still standing. We will. We went ahead, and I'm looking for that article, and I do not see that market at risk. Okay. And uh, we are, yeah, we were able to find that article, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to go right into that article because we think it's very, very important that we sort of share these this data with you. This was authored by Mike Jacobs. It was published on September the 29th in Evergreen Action, which is an outstanding online digital uh, platform. This union of concerned scientists, wealthy companies are building extraordinary expensive data centers that you are subsidizing. A new analysis from the Union of Concerned Scientists revealed that electric bills across the PJM region are forcing consumers to pay billions to connect big tech massive data centers to the grid. Households in 7 states, including Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, were on the hook for the 4.3 billion in 2024 alone. Utilities are taking advantage of outdated rules, pass these costs onto ratepayers instead of charging the companies actual driving the demand. And the system is working exactly as designed, protecting monopoly utility generators and tech giants while sticking families with the bill. If the PJM regulators are serious about affordability, must end the cost shifting scheme and require big tech to pay their fair share. Data centers are already increasing your bills, and it goes right into key points. Electric bills are going up around the country. Some of these increases are due to outdated practices, which we just said. We talked about our new analysis tallies before those states, Illinois, Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, getting hit with a $4.3 billion cost rate hike in 2024. Data centers built recently have electricity demands that of small cities. The proposals for data centers campuses have power demand for a total power plant in some small states. Through review planning and documents across states when grid operators, PJM, I found 133 examples of electricity utilities connecting data centers to grids with very expensive new lines, while costs uh, consumers go the consumers on the old rules. From most perspectives, the moral wrong is bad policy. However, the perspective of rules of electric companies making routine expansions to the transmission and distribution is the standard practice around the country. And this goes on, and it breaks down everything as relates to totaling 4.3 billion in 24 alone. and you'll be able to find these key points under this particular article that we're reading from at the present time. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to move along and look back at 2025 and look forward to 2026, and we'll see where we are right now. Now, in October, Attorney General Anthony Brown filed brief defending major offshore wind practices in Maryland. Now, this was a lawsuit that the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the state of Maryland bought to protect the wind industry because the industry the state stands to lose some $6 billion in investment in offshore wind and thousands of jobs and opportunity. Joint Senator condemns Trump's administration's decision to eliminate the CDFIF fund staff. Now, this is very, very key, ladies and gentlemen. Let me be clear. When the Biden and Harris administration came to office, they had to do a yeoman's job in putting together legislation, which turned into policy, which was the policy that turns into legislation, from legislation into actual a executive order, which brought these opportunities to the forefront through the Invest in America agenda. The Biden Harris administration chose to use community development, investment development of banks, which are called CDFIs, financial institutions. They can be credit unions, they can be banks, they can be, but these all have one thing in common. They specifically are set there to help those low and moderate income communities that have had additional challenges with getting funding or financing through the traditional banks for economic development projects. So the CDFI offices, which regulate these organizations that the Biden and Harris administration chose to use those organizations to channel the funding through to the states and the public and private sector to move these projects nationwide forward. And the president administration came in and undercut and pulled the funding for the staffing through the Treasury Department, which monitors the activities of these organizations. The federal government's not going to put billions of dollars out into the marketplace and nobody's there to oversee and regulate that money through those organizations that's receiving the funding. So this shows that there is no commitment from the current administration to work with the renewable energy companies or sectors at all. That's why I do not understand why there's not an outcry around the executive order, the bill that Senator Shontel Brown and Raskin has introduced, H.R. 989, to codify federal contracting laws, which in fact is the basis of giving these entities that have already signed the contractual arrangements and agreements with the federal government to receive this funding. Here in the state of Maryland alone, the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which serves as our green bank, was slated to receive $233 million from various different federal grants that they did not receive. This has had a very impactful and deafening impact on being able to help low and moderate income residents in Maryland move to renewable energy and clean energy sources within the state. Now, the Joint Center condemns Trump's administration to eliminate the CDF of our staff. Now, I also had a gentleman who is one of our board members, Mr. Tony Henderson, who explained how data centers impact solar development and development programs. And you'll be able to hear that in our October news and events window. Also, AFRICOM, Where Africa and America Meets, conversation with Mrs. Deborah Lyles in November, who talked about the investment tax credit for solar, rooftop solar, being eliminated and the impact it has had on the solar industry, credits and possible impacts on the industry. We're also looking at tackling federal lawsuits, climate, environmental actions and policies on the CDIF and Trump administration party. Then we looked at Unlock Africa's $16 trillion opportunity. And to close in December, we had the opportunity to be a guest on Mr. Antoine Thompson's show with the Greater Washington Clean Cities Collaboration Group transportation meeting for the month of December of 2025. And you'll be able to hear Dr. Fablu, who is a tenured professor at Purdue University for over 30 years, who has come up with an ingenious solution for something called mobile power grids. And they also have a company, 24M, that they have partnered with that have designed an electric battery, which you can get 1,000 miles with one charge on this EV battery. Also, we also heard from a brilliant gentleman by the name of Malcolm Fabu, who is come up with a solution to what is called mobile carbon capture. And you'll be able to find all of that under our news and events tab for December. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we have sort of brought everything up to speed as it relates to what actually took place in the last 6 months in the renewable energy industry, how the legislative moves, the executive orders, the tariffs, and the various things have impacted the renewable energy industry and the impact it is having on that. Now, any of you who might be looking at this video may be interested in this particular sweatshirt that I'm wearing. I'm wearing it in honor of Dr. King Day that will be Monday. And this is a design for one of the former that I did through one of my former companies that I had a sports apparel design firm, and this is one of our designs that we produced. So if anyone might have any interest in that, we're no longer putting these shirts in the marketplace, but if there was such a demand, I guess we could, a little boy said, crank the presses back up. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, 2026 we're in January. We are aware of the smoke and mirrors that has come from this present administration, that they claim that Venezuela was transporting of fentanyl to the U.S. and smuggling drugs. And, and if you have not been buried under a rock, if you are living in space, we are quite aware of the illegal activities that have been taking place by our government in terms of how they have been dealing with, rather than capturing these boats and come up with the evidence, they just been blowing people out the water. Well, that served as the precursor for them to do what Trump's plan was he went in, and as you are aware, he has sent special forces in. They have ejected and the president of Venezuela, taking him in culture and in legal sanctions, and in fact taking control of the Venezuela's oil fields, which are some of the largest in the world. So we are dealing in some very serious uh, P political GOP political situations right now, looking at 26, but all of it goes right back down to one thing: the fossil fuel industry and the demand and need and the greed that's involved in the fossil fuel industries refusing to shift toward a new green, clean economy. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, you know, and I know that we had the option of looking at how we could ratify and take advantage of the marketplaces, and we did not have to go where this country has gone, but we're past that now. As as people say, the cat's out the bag. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another exciting edition of Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. I want to take the time to acknowledge that on this past Friday, I was at a memorial service for one of my fraternity brothers, Mr. Uh, Anthony McPhail, who was a very, very dear friend as well as a fraternity brother of our organization, Tau Alpha Upsilon. We gave our final memorial respects at my alma mater, Morgan State University, on Friday, and I just wanted to share that with uh, with my listening audience and to let people know we, many of us who are baby boomers, we are living. We're not getting ready to experience. We understand that we must pass the mantle on to the next generation. The issue is the next generation willing to accept it, and will they listen to instructions? Because we know, my grandmother used to say it a long time ago, Miss Emma McLeod. She said, you know, if common sense was common, then everybody have some. And a hard head makes a real soft rear end if you sort of get it. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, a little words of wisdom to our young people out there, and we need to keep pushing the mantle around the legislation, HR 989, which has been introduced for the uh, the codify the Equal Opportunities Act, and also we have to be very, 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 very clear on what the priorities are. Also, we need to focus in and call our senators, because the very good news yesterday, the House Ways and Means Committee passed the African Growth Act, a GOA, and it has to pass the Senate to be extended to June of December of 2028, and we need to keep this trade policy in place between the U.S. and Africa. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we don't want you to meet us back here next week. We want you to beat us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with an economic impact on Black America. And remember, I'm your host, Ronald Buffet, and I ain't got a problem letting you know we're not the greedy here on this platform. We're the needy. So if you would please go to our GoFundMe link and click on that and see how you can contribute something to this platform, and so we can continue to bring you this information, because I think it's information and news that you can definitely use. With that being said, go in peace.